So, without further ado, I also mentioned there's going to be some light customizing in my tweet. And that is the case. There will be some light customizing at the end. There's also going to be, because you guys love it so much, bonus figure. So, let's get into it. And, I do want to start us off with this one, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to try and do our MCU characters towards the end. Because I'd say we've got a hearty mix, but actually, most of our figures today, are comic book. We've got, a mixture of 5 and 6. No, 5 and 5. So it's even. Alright, well in that case, let's start out with everyone's favorite villain. Well, most people's favorite villain. Our first figure for today is going to be the Loki from the new Endgame wave. So, as we can see inside of here, we've got our standard window pane front with all of our goodies on the inside, our nice little artistic renditions of Loki on the sides there. We've got our artistic rendition of Loki here on the back, and the whole wave shown on the back here. Now you guys know I normally don't do all of the figures in the wave that don't have a build-to-figure piece. But today we're doing the whole thing from start to finish. We also have our blurb here about Loki, but I'm pretty sure we all know all about this character already. This is our first appearance Loki. The way he looked in Avengers #1, and even before Avengers #1, back in Hulk comics. But people will recognize this particular look of his from the first Avengers comic book from way back in the day when the Avengers were made of Goliath and Wasp. Captain America wasn't even yet a member until halfway through this story arc. So, on the inside, we've of course got our figure in our backing. The backings have been a little bit plain as of late. It's just kind of a lens flare on a blue background there. Inside of here, we've got pretty minimal accessories. We have the first piece of our build-to-figure, our Professor Hulk leg, which of course we will put to the side until the end. We've got Loki's sword, which he was famous for using back then. Not so much now. Now we get daggers, but back then swords were Loki's thing. Well, this one at least. And it's tricky getting him out of here with this luscious mane of a ponytail he has. Now I'm trying to figure out which body this is, because this is a fairly obvious reuse of a body here. I believe it's the Bucky cap. I noticed the peg on the back here, which is pretty standard for Bucky cap and pretty standard for the Hyperion Buck, but he's a lot smaller than the Hyperion Buck. So, it's probably going to be the Bucky cap. Well, here is the figure as we have him. Again, pretty minimal on the accessory count. We only have the one sword here. It's a neat looking sword, but we're here for the figure himself. So, as always, let's test out this articulation. For our neck articulation, we're looking at a great deal of neck articulation downwards. He can actually really look down on his enemies and those that he feels are beneath him, which in Loki's case is absolutely everybody. His upward neck articulation actually is really surprisingly good. He is very hopeful. He looks up to a bright future. I'm pretty impressed with that. Loki's not one to really look at things on the bright side.
Always look on the bright side of life.
But he's looking really good here. For our shoulder articulation. Ooh. That's as far up as we're going. We can't even get a full T-pose out of our man here. And that's a little... Ouch. Huh. Loki, you gotta work on that, my friend. Next up we have, of course, the bicep swivels, as per usual. And how are we doing with our bicep articulation? Our elbow, Loki. Loki. We already know by now. We need that good flex. We need this. We need that full flex here. This ain't cutting it. It's pretty good, but it's just not enough. I'm sorry, man. You got to do better than that. Additionally, and this is still going to upset me until the end of time, we have both of his hands having the inward and outward wrist hinge. We do not have the up and down wrist hinge, just the in and out. Hasbro. You gave our man a sword, and then you didn't give him the up and down wrist hinge. Why would you do this? Why?
Why are you the way that you are?
Anyway. His arm articulation is pretty lacking. I'm not gonna lie. His head's good. The face sculpt looks... Let's be honest here. It's a little unsettling. That is a very unsettling face. But it's got great detail. But it's still a very unsettling face. For our ab crunch. Ladies, he's bending over backwards for you. Unsurprisingly. That's actually pretty impressive. And going forward. Ow! My man Loki, how do you have less articulation going forward than you do going back? Wow. That boggles the mind. We do also have a belt piece here, which actually pretty cleverly hides the fact that there is a waist cut. It hides it pretty well, actually. That's somewhat impressive. I wish that we had a loop here so that we could put the sword there when he's not using it, but you can't have everything, I suppose. For our hip articulation. Loki, my man, what are you doing? What is this mess? What is this nonsense? I'm better flexible than this. I've got more flexibility, and come on, man. You can do better. We also have, of course, our thigh swivels, our double jointed knees, which actually go a decent way back. I'll give him credit. I'll give credit where credit is due. The knees actually work. Do we not have boot cuts? Because it seemed we do have boot cuts. I thought so. It looked like we had them, but it wasn't going at first. Yes, indeed, we do have boot cuts on him. For our ankles, we've got a decent amount of forward articulation. All right amount back. And of course, he should have these standard rocker ankles with a decent amount of articulation in and out on those. All in all, I think he's an alright figure. If you're a big fan of the comic version of Loki, if you've always wanted to have a comic appropriate for the first issue of the Avengers Loki, then this is going to be your man. He's got our Jester collar here, which Hasbro, if we're not reusing this collar on the Doc Ock body to make a Toad figure in the near future, I don't know what you guys are doing. If you're not reusing this collar with that Doc Ock body, you're wasting money. Honestly. It's a cast you've already made. It's easy enough to just reuse said cast. All in all, it's an alright figure. Again, if you want a comic accurate one, because we haven't had a comic book figure for Loki in a very long time. We've gotten some MCU versions. We saw in the last unboxing, we got the version that came with Corvus Glaive. We've had the Ragnarok version, and we had the Walmart exclusive Avengers 1 version, but we haven't had a good comic Loki since the Onslaught wave back in the ToyBiz days. Not even Hasbro, back in ToyBiz days is the last time that we got a good comic book Loki, and that was more of a modern comic Loki. This is an original comic Loki. If you want that original look for him, it's a good figure. On a scale of 1 to 10, he's I don't even know what I would give him. Honestly, he's just pretty much mold reuse. He's got 2 new molds with the head and the neck piece. I believe even the sword is a mold reuse. I'd give him a 5. He's not fantastic by any stretch of the words, but he's a serviceable figure. I don't like that that's the best word I can come up with for him, but serviceable seems like the best way to describe what we've got here. For our next figure, we're going to go into the MCU here. This is a figure I was very excited about. I've been dying to get a figure of this particular character for a very long time, since it was first announced with Iron Man 3. The fact that they canceled that figure from Iron Man 3 was one of the biggest disappointments I've gotten. So, the fact that we've got her now makes me so happy. And that is Rescue. Now, you will note this is the MCU version of Rescue, not a comic book version of Rescue as we were first teased back in the Iron Man 3 days. But at this point, I'm not going to be choosy. After all, that Rescue that was teased was only available as a Marvel Insider exclusive, which I wasn't at the time. I never got it. Makes me a little bit upset that I didn't. But in the meantime, between time, we've got Rescue. So, once again, we've got our window pane with our accessories and our figure on the inside here, and our Professor Hulk Build-to-Figure piece there. Our artistic rendition of Rescue on the side and back, our blurb about her back there, and of course the rest of the lineup here. Now, if you can't tell, I'm excited, so let's tear into this one. Once again, for the packaging, we're not seeing much. It's the same Starburst, but it's got an Avengers A on it now. So, it's a little bit different, but not too much. I like that they gave this piece its own little plastic haven for her flaps.
Why are we still here? Just to suffer?
And her non-open backpack has its own piece as well. Additionally, we've got our chest, our rather big beefy torso here of Professor Hulk. So we are of course going to put that to the side, but as I do all the time while we're doing these, I'm going to start assembling our figure because our last figure to be reviewed once the wave is all unboxed will be, of course, Professor Hulk. Then we'll get to our bonus reviews after that. So we've got our backpack with the open flaps that was in our special container here. And of course we've got Rescue herself. So let's pop her out and see just what we've got. I'm already seeing something here that I'm going to have a major critique on. And amazingly, it's not the elbows, because it's a female figure with double-jointed elbows. Can you believe it? I can barely believe it. Hasbro actually made a figure with double-jointed elbows for a female. How about that? It's crazy. It's as though they could do that all the time. Just saying. So, one critique I have right off the bat is her hands. Now, as we can see here, the hands that we've got are just closed. All that we have are a set of closed hands, a closed fist on each hand. Rescue is an Iron Man character. It's Pepper Potts inside of her own armor. Why we wouldn't have gotten open hands when we know that Iron Man and even Pepper in the movie use repulsors. That's a misstep in my book. That's a major misstep in my book. We'll actually take a look at how these backpacks look on her later on. First things first, let's check out our articulation, because this rescue mold seems to be a pretty new buck. I'm not sure how much is reused from the comic book version of Rescue, but I know that at least the head is new. I believe the chest is new as well. Again, I'm not sure how much is reused from that comic book version, as I do not have that, but it's a pretty solid new-looking mold. I haven't seen this in any other figure that I own. For our neck articulation, she can look down amazingly well, and can actually look up pretty well too. That's decent enough for a good flying pose. Which would be probably how I'm not sure if I'm going to have her flying forward or if I'm going to have her just kind of hovering up and down, but that's probably how I'm going to have her, is hovering or flying, since having her just kind of static on the ground seems like a waste of an Iron Man figure. For our shoulder articulation, that's all we're getting. We're not quite getting a full T-pose because of our armor plating up here, but we're getting a decent amount of arm articulation for the shoulders here and here. We also have bicep cups. That's right, there are bicep swivels. Amazingly, there is a female figure with bicep swivels. How amazing is that? I'm calling you out here, Hasbro. For our double-jointed elbows. Yes! That's what I'm talking about. That is that good flex. That's nice. Alright, Hasbro. You done good. For our hand articulation, we've got a secondary problem here, as this armor plate makes it so there's no backward hand articulation whatsoever. It just stops right there. She can come forward, but to what avail? She can bend her hand forward, but for absolutely no purpose. She can't do anything but keep her hands kind of static. With a second set of hands, preferably repulsor hands, that could really be changed, but here we are. We do not have an ab crunch nor a waist cut. We do have an ab swivel, though, which we have this amount of movement side to side. And for our front and back movement, that's as far as she's bending over forward. I'll actually get that arm out of your guys' way. And she's actually got a fair amount of backward movement. Far more than she had forward, which seems to be a theme for the day. For our hip articulation, that's it. Which, again, I'm more flexible than this. Come on now. Now, I know that we do have the armor plating here and here. And that is what's keeping a lot of that hip movement from going any further, as it's cutting in at the back end of the thigh. But that's as far as it's going. We also do not have a thigh cut. Do we? We do, but it's a sneaky thigh cut. But also, it doesn't move too much because, again, that armor plating gets in the way. But it does move just a hair. I don't know if you guys can see that. But there is a slight movement to the hips. Or to the thighs, rather. I think that's a great way to sneak in some thigh articulation and keep it kind of hidden behind this armor plate here. It's not the most thigh articulation, but it's something. And it doesn't break up the sculpt, which is nice. For our double-jointed knees. That is a good flex. That's what we're looking for. That's looking great. Finally, for our feet, we've got a decent way forward here. Not tremendous, but not horrible. And she's not quite going back on point, but she can get into a good flyer position backwards. Finally, with our rocker ankles, we've got some inward motion, not a whole lot. And a decent enough deal of outward motion. It's not fantastic, but it's not horrific. A lot of the articulation limitations are right here at the bottom of the armor, where there's an armor piece that kind of goes around her leg there. Finally, I said we would take a look at the figure when we were done looking at our articulation here, with our backpacks on. So, with our closed wing backpack, that actually blends with the sculpt really well, to the point where it looks like it's part of it. They even made sure that if you look closely here, it blends right at the seam here, to the point where you can't even see the seam. That's actually very clever. It looks really good. I am proud, Hasbro. I am proud. Now, I thought I saw that, and that is cool. Her back flaps, we have the 4 static ones here, but the 2 on the inside are cast from a different piece of plastic and actually are articulated. So you can have them fully out. That's pretty neat looking. And, of course, how it looks with all of that opened up on her. Now that is a cool looking figure. I will give them credit. That looks really sharp. With all of the backings there, with all of the flaps open, that's something I would expect from a much higher grade figure than a Marvel Legend. And I'm really, really impressed. That's a really good look. Again, I do wish that I got a Repulsar hand here, but I'll take this. I'll take this. I'll take this every day of the week. That's a very, very cool looking figure. I'm pretty happy with it. I'll be honest, now granted, I've personally been waiting for a rescue figure for some time. But they didn't disappoint with the release here. They could have just kind of phoned it in like they have with some of the other figures. You'll see certain ones I'm talking about in just a second. But this figure doesn't feel phoned in. It feels very thought out. It feels like there was a good amount of new tooling done here. It's a great figure. So far, she's my recommend right now. I'm not saying that she's my only recommend, but she's a definite highly recommended figure from me. I think that she looks wonderful. I think that the new tooling on her is great. I think it's an amazing figure. I do wish that she had a secondary set of Repulsar hands on her, because we know of Iron Man doing his big Repulsar thing. And it's only because of that, I'm going to give her an 8 out of 10. She's not perfect. but she's pretty good. Next up, we're going to go far from home. We're going to go with our next figure here, who is Union Jack. Now, you might recognize this character if you're a big fan of Excalibur, or if you're a fan of trying to see what the Marvel teams look like in other parts of the world. Specifically for him, the UK. Obviously, from the uniform, you can tell he's from the UK. Now, this is the first time we've seen Union Jack since the Red Hulk figure, which was a Target exclusive. That was over a decade ago. It's been a minute. So, let's get into it. We've got, of course, our figure with his accessories on the inside here. Our stylized version art on the side and back. Our blurb right back here about him. And, of course, our lineup of the Rogues Gallery of figures that we're going to be unboxing today. So, inside of our box here. Let's just open that up real quick and find out exactly what we're dealing with. Now, I already know a little bit of what we're dealing with, and I'm already a little bit disappointed, I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'll explain why as we go. So, once again, inside the box, we've got our lens flare burst in the back, our cover that's become the new go-to for the style of packaging Marvel Legends. We've got our Professor Hulk arm. Over here, which of course we're gonna toss onto our Build-to-Figure so that we can give him a review final. Give him a final review, because I can speak today, I can. I swear. He is going to be a big beefy boy when he's done. And a big squishy boy? I'll tell you guys about that a little bit later. That's unusual. So, we've got our accessories for Jack, which are a revolver. So, Hasbro, you do indeed know how to make a revolver. You do know how to make a revolver. So, it's as though you could have given this to, oh, I don't know, say, Spider-Man Noir, a character who's known to use revolvers, instead of me needing to get some from other figures. And his knife. We also have, of course, Union Jack himself. Now, the reason why I said already, before opening him up at all, that I was a little bit disappointed is, when they first revealed our Union Jack figure here, he was not on this body. This is, of course, as we can all tell, this is the Bucky Cap body. This is one of the oldest molds that Hasbro uses, and they are still using it to this day, and I don't know why. It is a very old mold that needs to be retired, but when they first showed it off, it was not on this body. It was on the Spider-Man 2099 body, which meant it had extra shoulder articulation with the butterfly shoulders. It was far more flexible, but instead, Bucky Cap. A neat thing about this figure is his belt does actually have sheaths and holsters for his weapons, so we could take that knife of his, and it fits just fine over here. We can also take his revolver, and it fits just fine right over here. Or at least it should. There we are, and even closes over the top. Or at least it should. We'll deal with that another time. In the meantime, let's look at our articulation, even though I'm pretty sure we've already seen exactly what our articulation is going to look like just a little bit earlier. Actually, he might be on the Hyperion book instead of the Bucky cap. It's a little bit unusual for Loki to be that large, but he doesn't look quite like the Hyperion. That's a very unusual design they did for him. I'm not sure exactly which mold that is, but we'll figure that one out. In the meantime, for Union Jack here, we've got our neck articulation. He can look a decent degree downward. And, of course, with nothing impeding him on the back, he can look up with great amounts of hope. For our shoulder articulation, hey, we got a T-pose. It only took 3 figures into the wave, but we finally got one T-pose. It's not better than a T-pose, but at least it's a T-pose. It's something. We, of course, have our bicep swivel. For our double-jointed elbows. Oof! You guys already know where this is going. We need that good flex, and we're just not getting it from you. My man. Come on now. If you're not flexing like this, then you're just not flexing right. Additionally, we've got the cuffs here, which are not attached. They're just kind of free moving cuff pieces. And both hands, the right hand trigger finger and the left hand gripping hand, are hinged inward and outward and not up and down. It would be nice to have this one be hinged up and down so that we could get that holding the weapon here with the knife underneath, kind of the solid snake pose. For our ab crunch, he can actually bend the most we've seen forward today. That's not saying much, but he can bend forward the most we've seen today. And he can bend a decent degree back. Not fantastic, but a decent degree. He also, of course, has a waist cut for the waist swivel, which is hidden enough by the belt. It's not hidden perfectly, but it's hidden enough. For our hip articulation, let's actually pull out this revolver of his, as that was impeding our hip articulation. But that's as far as we're going. We're not getting a split anytime soon out of him. For our counter-espionage spy from across the pond, he's not quite as flexible as I'd like him to be. We, of course, have our thigh cut here. Our double-jointed knees go a decent degree back. They're not fantastic, but they're fair enough. We also have a boot cut here. Something that I'm only now noticing Rescue did not have. For our ankle articulation, we can go a decent degree forward and can go on point back. The only thing keeping him going more forward or back is this band here for the cuff, which isn't even on straight, which probably means it's not glued on, which is kind of, there we are. Yeah. It's just kind of affixed there using friction. For our rocker ankles, we can go in a pretty grand degree and out an amazing degree as well. It doesn't surprise me that much, as he doesn't have anything but this one cuff impeding his articulation there. So it's a decent level of articulation for his foot. Out and out, am I going to say that he's a must-have? I will, under one condition: that you didn't get him the first time. Now, I personally have the previous Union Jack figure, and this, I'm not sure if it feels like a downgrade, a lateral movement, or what, but it doesn't seem that much different from our previous figure. It's nothing I'd write home about if you're not looking for a full Excalibur team, or you're not trying to get a bunch of Avengers from across the pond. Then he's not really a necessary thing for anything other than the Hulk arm. If you already got the previous figure and you don't want the Professor Hulk build to figure, you can pass on him. If you did not have the previous figure, if you're looking to grab a Union Jack for your collection, then I'd say pick him up. He's not horrendous, he's not an extreme disappointment, but he is pretty disappointing, I'm not going to lie. All in all, I'd give him a 5. I'm not going to say there's anything genuinely horrible about him. I was thinking about giving him a 4, but honestly, he's an alright figure for what he is. I think I'm a little bit biased because I've got the previous figure, and I just think that he's so well done there. I almost wouldn't want another one, but again, that figure hasn't... This is the first representation we've gotten of this character in a decade. So, we do need some representation for the character. I'll give you that. For our next figure. And of course, you guys know that I'm building up to our biggest and beefiest of boys, both comic and movie. But, how about another female figure? 2 in one wave? You've got to be joking. Hasbro actually allowed 2 female figures in one wave? That's insane. We have Shuri, the Princess of Wakanda. Eventually, she would become the Black Panther, but this is our first time that we've seen her in her MCU appearance, which makes me very happy, because it means that I don't need to make the custom Shuri figure that I was trying to make previously. I'm very happy I don't need to try and make that now. So, of course, on the front, we've got our window pane here, where we see our Hulk leg, our Shuri figure, and our accessories. We've got our stylized art on the sides and back, our blurb about her here, and the rest of the line here. So, let's open her up and see exactly what we're working with. So, for our Shuri figure. Now that's interesting. It's the same lens flare, but instead of it being Avengers or instead of it being just a plain lens flare, there's the Black Panther symbol on here. That's pretty interesting. I'll give that credit where credit is due. You guys are getting a little bit creative with your backgrounds. Previously, you would have different backgrounds depending on where the character was from. Now you're trying to keep it all as one homogeneous background, but just kind of add little additions. Clever. I'll take that. Clever. We, of course, have our Professor Hulk leg, giving our figure a leg to stand on. Now, these legs did not want to go in on either side. It is a little bit tough to get them seated just right. But he is turning out to be a fairly big, beefy boy. I can't wait to take a look at this figure when it's all said and done. He's already turning out pretty amazingly. Before we get to that, though, let's get into Shuri. So, we've got our extra accessory piece here for the secondary kitten mitten. Alright, so, something of note. Actually, a couple things of note. Her gauntlets, her Wakandan gauntlets, are both removable. However, the effect piece is not removable from the gauntlet itself. So it's always going to have this weird blue spiral coming out of it no matter what, as long as you have on the correct pieces. Now, I will note that a lot of this figure does actually seem to be reuse from the 6-inch basic Black Panther figure that they made of Shuri back when Black Panther came out. They did do more for her hair here, but the face looks pretty similar. It's not quite the same. It's a little bit more detailed here, but it's a fairly similar face. I know this wrap here is actually, I'm pretty positive, the exact same wrap from that previous figure. Do we have a waist cut here? We do not. Alright, good to know. I know that's going to be limiting our articulation, but I'm really, really, genuinely happy to have Princess Shuri on my shelf. I think she's an amazing character, and I'm just happy to have a figure of her. I actually had her as one of my top wants after the Black Panther movie came out, and she wasn't in either of the two waves, amazingly. But they threw her into the Endgame wave, which, hey, works for me. So, getting into our articulation. For our neck articulation, she can look downward a decent degree, even with the ceremonial neck brace on. And can look up with all kinds of hope. So that's actually a great deal of articulation. I never noticed this before, but actually the back of her hair has sculpted in lines. I never even noticed that in the movie. That's very interesting. I never noticed the sculpted lines shaved into the back of her head. I always just noticed the... I'm not sure if they're micro dreads or micro braids for the rest of her hair. I never noticed the back of her head here. I don't know if we got shown the back of her head. For our shoulder articulation, we're getting better than a T-pose. Hey, how about that? Of course, that's made up for by the lack of bicep articulation and the fact that she's only got a single jointed elbow. Meaning that is as far as her elbow is going to go. No further, just that. Just that 90 degrees. Hasbro. Where's that good flex? Where's that good flex for one of our strongest, I'd say female characters, but no, that's not true. One of our strongest characters in the wave. I'm not talking just about physical strength. I'm talking about strength altogether. She needs to have that good flex. That genuine flex. Not just this 90-degree thing. That ain't working. That ain't working for me, man. Additionally, she does have hinged wrists with the in and out hinges. She has one gripping hand and one hand closed off in a fist. Once again, we only have a ab swivel instead of an ab crunch, and a waist cut, just the ab swivel. So, we've got that much articulation to the left, that much to her right, and then that much forward, and that much back. It's next to nothing. It's pretty much negligible. That kind of articulation is... It's not okay, Hasbro. We need better. I know that she's mostly a new mold. I do see parts of Okoye. I see parts of the Dora Milaje, which were pretty much just Okoye and Nakia. But you can do better. You guys can do better than this. Especially for Shuri. You guys can definitely do better. As I said before, we do not have a waist cut for our hip articulation. Even with the skirt, actually, that's not bad. We've got a decent amount of hip articulation. We also, of course, have the thigh cuts. For our double jointed knees, I'm not expecting a lot because we've got that skirt is really going to be bothering us. So let's see if we can kind of bypass that. You know, if we bypass the skirt, she's got a decent amount of articulation. It looks incredibly painful, but it's not quite all the way back, and it's not quite lining up appropriately. There's a big gap here in her knee, which does not look good, but it's more backward articulation with the knees than we've gotten with some of our figures today. No boot cut once again, but we do have our ankles, which that's as far forward as her ankle is going, but she can go almost entirely on point. For our rocker ankles, she does have rocker ankles, I hope, because these are seeming a little bit off. She's got that much outward articulation here. It's alright, it's not fantastic. It seems like she's wearing like high tops or something, but they don't even look like high tops. And a decent amount of inward articulation. Now, something of note with this is I'm pretty sure the shoes are a new mold, as they actually molded the bottom of the sneaker. Look at that. They molded the bottom of her sneakers here. You guys could have not done that and done so much else with the rest of the figure. But instead, you put your efforts into the soles by making them be sculpted. Final question that I've got is, how does she look with her most famous accessory, the kitten mittens? And the answer is she looks alright with them. She looks okay with them. That's actually a pretty decent pose that you can do with said gauntlets, because we'll call them what they actually are. They're the Wakandan Vibranium gauntlets. But that's a decent pose that can be done using those with her, with a steely look of determination as she's firing out the waves from her Panther gauntlets here. That's not bad. All in all, again, I'm probably biased. Much like Rescue, she's a figure I've been looking forward to since the moment I saw Black Panther. The moment I saw Black Panther, I said, I want a Shuri figure. Because she was cool. I'll be honest, she was cool. I liked having Okoye. I liked having Nakia. I liked it when they finally brought out more of the Dora Milaje and we got Io. But having actual Shuri in the appropriate form with the appropriate articulation, not looking quite as boxy as the basic figure did, it makes me pretty happy. She's gonna be a 6 for me. She's gonna be a 6. I'm really happy with this figure because it fills a niche in my Black Panther display that I really wanted to have, to go along with my 3 Dora Milaje, my Nakia, and my Okoye. I'm happy with the figure. I'll be honest with you guys. I'm happy with it. I've got no complaints, but I'm probably not the right party to ask. Because I'm biased. I've really been wanting to get that figure. So, next up, we've got another comic book figure. This one's a little bit more obscure. Our comic book figure is filling a niche for me, but that's because I'm a giant weirdo that loves the Serpent Society. So, we have here Rock Python. Now, as you can tell by looking at him, he's part of the Serpent Society. If you couldn't tell from the name, Rock Python. Inside, we don't have a whole lot. We've got the figure, we've got our build-to-figure piece, we've got our art on the side and on the back, which is actually the same art. With Shuri, at least, it was two different pieces of art. This, they just made one and copy-pasted. We've got our little blurb about him, and of course the remainder of our figures. Now, that means that in recent time we've been giving a Cottonmouth figure, a King Cobra figure, and now a Rock Python figure. We are slowly getting together a Serpent Society. If you've got the Constrictor figure, which I do, already that's 4 members. You can choose to put Eel with them, and you've got a 5-man villain squad, which, it's something. It's not perfect. I'd like some of the other members of the team to kind of fill out the roster, but as is, that's not bad. In the packaging, again, we have one of our last pieces of our Professor Hulk Build-to-Figure, which we will pop on now for when we review him in just a moment. He is a big, beefy boy. I like what they have done with this Hulk. I'm going to be replacing my previous Hulks with this one. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I like this Hulk. I like him a lot. But for Rock Python himself, you're looking at everything you've got there. That's it. No accessories, no unmasked head. Doesn't even look like the helmet here can be removed. I'm sure that it can, but I'm not sure exactly what kind of sculpt we've got underneath. I'm not sure I want to know. He's on a larger body, amazingly. I thought he'd have been on a slightly smaller one. Is he on the same scale as Loki is? He is. So they might actually both be on the Hyperion, which would be really weird to have Loki on that. But he's got the back... He's got that back peg as well, so he very well might be. Alright. Well, we don't have a whole lot to look at here besides this incredibly floppy ab articulation, so let's get into our articulation here. For our head articulation, he can look down on those that he sees as less than him and can only look up that far. He's not full of hope like the others that we've seen today. Everyone else has been looking very hopeful. They've been looking to a bright new future. He's not really doing that. For our our shoulder articulation, we're getting about a T-pose. It was a little bit tough to get him here, but we're getting just about a T-pose from him. So, not bad, not great, but not bad. We've, of course, got our bicep swivels, our double-jointed elbows, which, again, Hasbro. You already know what I'm going to say here, Hasbros. Where's that good flex? Where is it? We also have hand articulation going inward and out with our wrist hinge here. Now, a thing of note is that he has 2 gripping hands, but no accessories to grip. We'll note Cottonmouth had both of his hands kind of like this. I believe King Cobra had the same thing where he had this hands. They were like the claw type, reaching out for you. I'm not sure exactly what Rock Python here is supposed to be grabbing onto. I know that he's a mercenary, so maybe they intend on you to give him a gun. Maybe it would have been nice if you gave us a gun for him. That would have been cool. Moving on, for our incredibly loose ab crunch. That's as far back as we're getting. That's it. That's everything. And for our forward ab articulation, we're going forward somewhat, but we're not going a great deal. It's because of that I would think that this might be on the Hyperion buck, just because that's not a lot of flexibility. We do have a waist cut, which is, again, very cleverly hidden by his belt here. That's a very clever use of some props to make it so that we aren't seeing... It's a weird piece of flesh that was on here. That we aren't seeing the articulation there. For our hip articulation, because I can speak today, that's it. That's as far as they're going. I'm pretty sure this is actually the exact same mold we just saw with Loki, so that's a lot of part reuse and not a whole lot that's been done otherwise. Maybe they did all of their new sculpting into our final comic figure and our 3 MCU figures, because these first 3 comic figures, they haven't had it, that's for sure. For our thigh, we of course have a thigh cut, as per usual. Our double jointed knees can actually go back almost all the way. He's got a little bit extra muscle here to make it keep it from going back all the way, but that's not bad. That's not bad at all. Of course, he also has a boot cut, because it's in the exact same place as they were for Loki. Seriously, this is just a repainted Loki, but they made it look nice. For our ankle articulation, we're going a decent degree forward, and we're going all the way on point back. For our rocker ankles, that's actually a great deal of inward motion to an incredibly painful degree. And a great deal of outward ankle motion as well, once again, to an incredibly painful degree. All in all, looking at the figure, it's mainly part reuse, guys. I'm not going to lie to you. It's just pretty much... It's the same body that they had for Loki earlier on in this same wave, which is just lazy, with a new head, which I'm not even sure is an entirely new head, but I know that it's a new helmet. And then our waist belt here, which may or may not be part reuse. I honestly can't tell at this point. And that's very little new sculpting here. Honestly, if you don't know who Rock Python is, if you're not trying to get together a Serpent Society like I am, if you don't need that extra arm for Hulk, or if you're just going to buy the extra arm online, he's a pass. All in all, he's going to be a 4 out of 10 from me. I'm sorry, Rock Python. I really am. You're not going to be getting a high score because you're just part reuse. You're just some new paint onto a body we've seen 100 times over with a new head and maybe a new waist. Now, moving on. We have our last movie figure of the wave before we get into our 2 bonus figures, which are also MCU figures. But I have been waiting. Oh, just in package already. He is, say it with me, a big beefy boy. Ladies and gentlemen, Endgame War Machine. Now, there are going to be some of you out there saying, that's not what he wore in Endgame. I'll be honest with you. I prefer this over the red, white, and blue throwback to Iron Patriot from the end scene of Endgame. I think it looks really great. I think he looks amazing. And he has some heft. For a single pack figure, he is a hefty boy. He is a big, beefy boy. Of course, on the inside, we see that we do not have a Professor Hulk Build-A-Figure piece. Vamp, you bought a Professor Hulk Build? bought a figure without a Professor Hulk Build-A-Figure piece? That's not like you. You always skip over the Iron Man that doesn't have the Build-A-Figure piece, or the Quantum Suit Captain America without the Build-A-Figure piece, and you're correct. But this is just such a brilliant new mold, I had to have it. We've seen, of course, on the inside here, War Machine with all of his accessories. We've got our art on the side here, our different art on the back here with our blurb all about Rhodey, and the wave here on the back. So, let's open them up and see just what we can see for this supremely large action figure. So, the backing once again has the Avengers A. It's nice to have you guys acknowledge that Rhodey is indeed part of the Avengers and not just an Iron Man side character. But inside is where we get to the real meat of this figure. So we have the underarm guns. If you guys remember, he had the guns mounted to the underside of his arm in Avengers Endgame. Which also have, amazingly enough, handles, so he can use them as just giant guns. That's kind of cool. We also have our rather hefty shoulder cannon here. And then, best of all, and biggest of all, is our big, beefy boy known as War Machine. And guys, let me tell you, this figure, it's hefty in hand. It's big. It's awesome. This was one of my two biggest wants from this wave. Between this and the final comic book figure, who's also a big beefy boy. I don't know who I was looking forward to more. I've got some War Machines already. I've got some comic ones. I've got some ones from the MCU, but oh, guys, this one is... I'm smiling. I'm smiling. You guys know it takes a lot to make me smile. But a figure like this will easily do so. For a size comparison, this is what our Pepper looks like next to our big beefy Rhodey here. That is a big suit of armor. That makes me happy. So, let's get into looking at, of course, our articulation. So I'm not sure just how well articulated he's going to be, just because all of the new molding here. I hope you guys can appreciate this as much as I can. How much new molding was put into this. It's almost because of just this figure that I'm willing to forgive the reuse of the molds from Loki and Rock Python. Just because this figure is so out of this world phenomenal. I mean, the new shoulder pieces, which are very thankfully soft goods, so we can... Let's get into them. We can get a full-on T-pose, for the most part, out of War Machine. Now, he's got these big spalders on him. These big pieces of armor. And if you look underneath here, he even has some detailing for the mech suit. Because let's call it Duck and Duck here. It's what Iron Man armors are. They're just awesome mech suits. You can see that inside of the shoulder there. So, I believe these pieces are actually articulated onto the shoulders themselves. Whew. The biceps are huge. I can't even use words right now. I am genuinely impressed. Our forearms are gigantic. Our thighs, our calves. He doesn't have a ab crunch, he only has a swivel, but that's because of all of the new detailing done here on the chest. Plus, with shoulders like this, I'm not expecting him to even be able to turn his head side to side. He can, but not too well. Like, oh, so much heft to this big beefy boy. Look at the back. This is the kind of thing that makes me still be into toy collecting after all of these years. Looking up, that's it. That's all that we're looking up here. That's as far up as he can look. Looking down, that's it. He's not looking down on you because he can't move his neck that much. Of course, we can take our shoulder cannon here. Pop it right into place. And just add to the heft of this character. Now, as we saw before, we only have these single jointed elbows, but we do have a bicep cut, amazingly. And the single jointed elbows, they're not moving back and forth. They're only going to this 90-degree angle. He's not getting that good flex, but he is so big and beefy, I wouldn't expect it. That is a lot of heft for one figure. Now, our hand here does have the inward and outward hinge. As you can see here, that's as far back as it's going, but it can go all the way in because of the armor plate here and the lack of armor on the opposite side. However, we're just trying to pop this big old gun underneath his arm to add into the fact that War Machine is moderately terrifying. And with the opposite hand, he can actually, if you so choose, have him hold the other gun. Why you'd want him to? Beyond me. When you can have it mounted as an under rail. Like this. Oh, guys, I'm not going to lie to you. This War Machine is replacing my other MCU one in my display. It is beautiful. This is what I think of when I think of War Machine. I think of Iron Man as being more lithe, more being able to fly through the air, being able to avoid attacks versus trying to be the attacker. War Machine, I think of as straight firepower. And we haven't seen this much firepower on a War Machine since his very first figure in Marvel Legends. And that was so long ago, it was during the Galactus Build-A-Figure back in the days of ToyBiz. For his for his ab swivel here, I'm not expecting anything. He can go this far to his left, that far to his right. Forward, that's it. That's all we're getting. And backward, yeah, I expected to get just about that much because of our armor plating back there. Oh, he is massive. For our hip articulation. You know what? For today's figures that we've seen, that's not horrible. I've seen far worse in far less figures that are definitely not War Machine, that don't have any right to not be able to move their hips that well. Now we also have some sneakily hidden thigh cuts here, hidden right behind this armor plate. For our double jointed knees, are we gonna... How are we gonna bend with these things? Because there. Are we gonna bend with these? We are. We are bending, and it's not great. But we've got armor plating everywhere. I wasn't expecting great. I was expecting about what I've got here, and I'm not disappointed. Finally, we've got our ankles where you can see the armor around the ankle. We're not expecting much. That is his forward ankle articulation. That is his backward ankle articulation. And we have rocker ankles, but they only go that far in and that far out. His articulation is very much impeded on by his sculpt, but with such a beautiful sculpt, I don't even mind. I'm still smiling. I also note that he has not just pegs in the bottom of his feet, like most do. These are actually the same kind of holes that you have for Iron Man figures, for the Repulsar Blasts. So, if you have extra Repulsar Blasts for one of the, I don't even know how many 100 Iron Man figures there are right now, you can put those in here to make him fly while looking like a mobile armory. This is a wonderful figure. It's hefty. It's beefy. It is a big, beefy boy. It is exactly what I think of when I think of War Machine. I think of a walking armory. I think of a guy who he doesn't need an aircraft carrier. He is an aircraft carrier. This is a beautifully done figure. If you get none of the other figures from this wave, that's fine. You won't have any extra Professor Hulk figure pieces to get rid of. Get this one. Get him. Straight up, get this War Machine. Oh, but he's not the right colors for Endgame. Get him. He is a beautiful addition to your MCU collection. He is an amazing figure. He's so hefty. I love this figure. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I love this figure. We will show you some comparison shots for how big he is compared to even the Build-A-Figure later on. So, for a single pack figure, he's huge. For an MCU figure, he's big. And for being from the Iron Man mythos, he's one of the biggest figures that we've got. There's no part of me that doesn't want to put him on my shelf immediately. I love every part about this figure. There's no part of me that doesn't want to pose him exactly like this. Just letting you know, Lieutenant James Rhodes is about to light you up. And it's wonderful. I love this figure. I think he's amazing. I'm going to keep moving on to our next figure, otherwise I'm going to keep talking about this one for the remainder of our time here. So, moving on. We have our final comic book figure in the wave, and that is, drumroll please, we haven't seen this character in plastic form since the Mojo wave back in the ToyBiz days. That is a very long time ago. That's like 12 years ago. It's been an obscenely long time since we have seen Beta Ray Bill. Now, we did see a little bit of an Easter egg for him in Thor Ragnarok, but that was only his head as part of the Grandmaster's former champions. This is a figure of him. It's a more modern figure of him. It's not the classic version, which is what we had back in the ToyBiz days, but I'm still excited to open him up. So, we've got, of course, our figure on the inside here, our window pane on the front, our art on the side, which is copy-pasted on the back, are a blurb about Beta Ray Bill and the remainder of the wave who we've all gone through. We've gone through all of them right now. Inside, we've got another very hefty single pack figure. And we have not one, but two, count them, two heads for our Professor Hulk Build-A-Figure. Meaning that you can make Banner look either serious and morose, or, come on now, we all know, we're putting this smirk on him. We're putting that smirk on. Serious and morose isn't going to cut it for us. We're getting a smirky Banner. Who is all together now to be our last figure to be reviewed. And guys, this is a great Hulk. This is a great Hulk for your MCU. This is a great Hulk for just your shelf. I love this figure. I haven't even started to do the articulation yet. He is such a big, beefy, hulky boy. I'm already loving it. Before we get into him, let's get into our Beta Ray Bill, where we have the original Stormbreaker, this time not in a faded plastic, but in a normal plastic, which is already a hefty accessory to our figure. Now, I'm going to guess that these are separate pieces. So that we can get out our odd Space Age Cowman. They are not separate pieces. I repeat, they are not separate pieces. His cape is part of his sculpt. It is secured on there. So be aware of that as you're trying to take him out. As that's an odd choice. Now, he is one of the figures I was looking forward to the most, since I do have the original Beta Ray Bill figure. Actually, I stand corrected. The cape does come off. The shoulders don't come off. But the cape attaches to the pegs on the front of his spalders. You can see the holes right there. That is a very unique design choice. I saw the peg. I didn't see that the pegs here were pegs at all. I thought it was sculpted on there like that. So we put the peg in the back first before we put it on his shoulders, and it ensures this cape isn't coming off pretty much no matter what pose you're putting him in. And even holding him by the cape, he's still retaining his pose. Now, this figure does have an extra point of articulation than the others, and it's the mouth. We have a fully articulated horsey mouth. He's so happy right now. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I'm liking him. I am liking him. I do have the classic version of this, but this is a great modern version of the figure. Let's get into the articulation before we start making judgments here. For our head articulation, he can look a decent degree downward, and he can look up with a great deal of hope, preferably in a flying position. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. For our shoulder articulation, I'm only going to imagine it's not going to go all the way up because of those spalders. And I am wrong. I am out and out wrong. That's what I get for assuming. He's T-posing, which, hey, it's the least I could expect. Not everyone could do it, but it's still the least I expect. He, of course, has the bicep swivels. And the double-jointed elbows. That's not a bad flex. I'm not going to lie to you guys. He might not be getting the full flex, but he's getting a decent flex here. That's a decent flex to our man. It's not quite full, but it's decent. I'll give him credit. It works. It just works. Now, amazingly and surprisingly, and I don't have enough adjectives in my vocabulary for why they would do this, Hasbro made brand new hands, as they had to, since Beta Ray Bill only has 4 fingers. Yet, they have the in and out wrist hinge. A character that uses a Thor hammer has an in and out wrist hinge. Hasbro. If you're gonna make a brand new hand, give him the proper hinge. Come on. That just makes sense to me. Especially since he has been known to sometimes use Stormbreaker two-handed, not just one-handed, as it is quite a big hammer. It is quite a large hammer, so it should appropriately be used two-handed at times. I'm not even sure if we can do that with him right now. Moving on, we do not have a ab crunch, just a waist swivel. That is as far left as he goes. That is as far right as he goes. As far as his forward and backward articulation, that is his complete forward articulation and his complete backward. That's it. He's barely standing up straight. There's not a lot of articulation there. I'm not going to lie to you guys. He does have the waist cut. For our hip articulation, the best hip articulation we've seen all day comes from the Alien Horseman. You can be surprised with me. You can be surprised with me, Thors. The best hip articulation we've seen in this wave is from the big, beefy Horseman. So, for our thigh articulation, we of course have a thigh cut on him. Our double jointed knees, they go back a decent degree. They're going back a little bit further than War Machine's, but War Machine was such a unique sculpt. I expect a little bit better from Thors here. You heard me, Thors. For our legs, we of course have the boot cut here, even though he's not wearing boots. We do have some ankle articulation on him. I'm just trying to get that cape back in place. And his weak hinged wrist here from flopping all around. Which, for our ankle articulation, we've got actually a pretty decent degree forward. And he can go all the way on point back, which is great for flying poses. As for our rocker ankles, he can go a disturbing degree in and a fairly disturbing degree out. All in all for this figure, I like the things that they did with him. I don't like other things they did with him. Is he perfect? No. Is he good? Yeah. Is he the best version of Beta Ray Bill we've gotten in over a decade? He's the only version of Beta Ray Bill we've gotten in over a decade. So, by default, yes. Is he fantastic? I'm not going to say yes. Is he good? Yes. Is he fantastic? No. He's a solid 8 out of 10 for me. He's not perfection, but he's not bad. If you're a fan of Beta Ray Bill, if you didn't get the figure over a decade ago, pick him up. He's definitely well worth it. Plus, with the 2 Professor Hulk heads, you're going to need him for those anyway. Speaking of which, we've been teasing that he's going to be coming all day today, so let's make this happen, shall we? You've heard me talking about him, you've seen the heads. Now, let's see what our Build-A-Figure looks like for our wave with Professor Hulk. Now, as you can tell, he is a, say it with me kids, big, beefy boy. In fact, let's do a little bit of size comparing, shall we? This is your Build-A-Figure next to your Thors. With their feet on level playing fields, he is heads and shoulders above the rest. Compared to our big, beefy, beautiful War Machine, he is dwarfed. And compared to Shuri, it's not even a question. It's not even a question. So, this Hulk is massive. He's not gigantic like some Build-A-Figures we've seen, but he is a pretty big guy. Now, as we saw before, we do have 2 heads that came with this one. We have the smirking head and the serious head. If you think I'm ever going to use this head, you're dead wrong. I'm going to use that head about as much as I use the solid head for Sandman. I don't. I only use the one that's all messed up with half sand out and he's screaming. Because it's the cooler head, let's be honest here. I like him smirking more than I like him just being serious. If he was screaming, maybe. But if he's just going to be either deadpan or smirking, I'm going smirk all day, every day. Let's get into the articulation on this guy. So, for our neck articulation, he can look down alright. It's not wonderful, but it's alright. And that's as far up as he's going. He's not looking to the sky with hope. He's barely even looking forward. For our shoulder articulation, he can just barely get to a T-pose before the arms start to want to pop out of their sockets. It's not bad, it's not great. He, of course, has a bicep swivel. He actually has something that we didn't get with our War Machine, and that's double-jointed elbows. And he's got a decent flex. It's not quite that good flex, but it's a decent enough flex. I can deal with that. We also have, of course, the inward and outward wrist articulation, instead of the up and down wrist articulation. The inward and outward's more appropriate for a character like Hulk anyway. I do like that we've got one fist hand and one open hand, so that we can get more of that I'm gonna punch you type look where he's got the hand out here, the fist back here, trying to wind up for it. It's a better look for him. We do not have an ab crunch, we only have an ab swivel. And something of note for everyone out there. You're looking at him and probably assuming that the plastic's all one type. You're actually incorrect. This plastic here is a soft goods PVC for his stomach. His stomach is soft. And I have no idea why. He has a soft tummy and a soft back. Maybe the Hulk hasn't been working out. I don't know, it's been 5 years. Anyway. That is as far as our left articulation goes with him. That's as far as our right articulation goes. Actually, that's pretty decent for an ab swivel. Our backward articulation actually makes it seem like he's gonna kind of dive onto you. That's not terrible. That's better than we saw with Loki's backward articulation. And our forward articulation isn't horrendous. It's not great, but it's not horrendous. He does have a waist cut on him. For our hip articulation, the absolute best hip articulation of the day is from Hulk, our Build-A-Figure. The best articulation for the Wave is the Build-A-Figure. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to leave that right there for you guys. We do, of course, have the thigh cut, as that's how the legs got attached, was at the thigh cut. For our double jointed knees. Ooh, Hulk, buddy. I know that you're a thick boy, but you got to do better than that, man. That's not good enough to get released from the hospital after knee replacement surgery. That's 90 degrees. That's not good. You can do better, Hulk. We do not have a boot cut, not surprising, as we have torn up pants instead. For our feet articulation, that's as far forward as these feet are going. And our Angry Shrek feet are only going that far back. They're almost going on point, but not quite. For our side-to-side ankle rockers, it's actually a decent degree in and a fairly decent degree out. All in all, I'd give this a "what you doing in my swamp" out of 10.
What are you doing in my swamp?
In all honesty, though, this Build-A-Figure is pretty great. He might be my favorite figure of the Wave besides War Machine. War Machine is just so unique, he is going to, no matter what, be my favorite. Beyond that, this Hulk Build-A-Figure is pretty incredible. I highly suggest picking it up if you don't have an MCU Hulk, if you don't have a good Hulk for your display at all. It's a great Hulk. I very much enjoy what they've done here. I think it looks great. I see this as an absolute win. Now, I know you guys are thinking, well, he said there's going to be bonus figures. What are the bonus figures? I'm glad you asked. So, we've gone through our standard wave. We've gone through the 3 big beefy boys of said wave. But there's a couple of extra figures that were in Endgame that weren't part of any wave. And I happened to find them, and I happened to get them, I'll be honest with you guys, for half off. It's the whole reason why I got them. Otherwise, I wasn't even thinking about getting these. But I got them with a purpose in mind. And we're going to be getting into that purpose as we unbox the Quantum Suit versions of Hawkeye and Black Widow. Now, if you've seen Avengers Endgame, I hope you have, because otherwise this whole extreme has spoiled everything for you. You'll note that Natasha has her red hair back with a little bit of blonde on the end, and we see Clint unmasked with his shaven sides of his head and the mohawk thing in these quantum suits. It also comes with 3 extra heads, 2 male, 1 female, so that you can use Nebula as the body here. It even comes with Nebula's blaster here. Or you can use Natasha's twin batons. It comes with Clint's bow, Clint's head, but you can take that off and use Tony or Scott Lang as the male body, making it kind of interchangeable, kind of fun. Because of that, we've got art for Clint and Natasha on their respective sides, and the same art copy and pasted on the back here with the blurb about both of them. So, the whole reason why I got this, besides it being 50% off, was to do some very light customizing. Now, I will be honest with you guys, I was not a fan of the quantum suits. I know, I already know. You don't need to say a word. I already know. I was not a fan of the quantum suits. The background is that same sunburst that we had with the lens flare and the big Avengers A on it. Inside, we've got our 2 figures, our 3 heads, and our mess of accessories. Now, the entire reason why this was purchased was actually not for the figures themselves, but for their accessories. Namely, I want those heads. Heads will roll today onto other figures. There was a small zip tie holding Hawkeye's bow in place, which we'll take out first, along with taking out our quantum suit Hawkeye. And we'll pop out Scott's head instead of Tony or Nebula's. We will pop out Nebula's gun, along with Black Widow here. And of course, if we're popping out Black Widow, we should pop out her batons as well. Now, some of this is all going to be part reuse, some of this is going to be new tooling. So, let's get into it and see exactly what we've got here. Now, the reason why I popped out this head is because immediately, right off the bat, I'm going to tell you guys, I'm not even going to keep this Hawkeye head on this quantum suit body. I'm not even for an instant. And that is because our light customization comes up now, not in switching this head. That's just appropriate in what you're supposed to do. No. But you'll recall, several weeks ago, 2 unboxing streams ago, in fact, I did the Avengers Endgame Ronin figure. Now, anyone who's seen Avengers Endgame will know that Ronin is actually Hawkeye. That's pretty obvious, actually. Uses a bow and arrow and uses a couple of swords, plus some shurikens. However, they never gave us an unmasked head for this figure. So our whole purpose behind getting this 2-pack of figures was to make this figure happen. That was it. It was to pop our unmasked Clint Barton head onto our Ronin. Give him, trying to see which way his bow is going up. Give him his bow. and make the actual perfect version of the character from Avengers Endgame. Now this figure I don't want to have as just a basic ninja. No. This I will display. Before, Ronin looked like just a basic ninja figure. You could army build him, put him up against Wolverine in a display, and have him being absolutely decimated. This is a different story. This is how he should have been packaged in the first place. That is a beautiful figure. And the head fits on absolutely perfectly. There's no looseness to it. It's as though it was made for this body. This is the Ronin figure we should have gotten. And it looks fantastic. I'm incredibly happy with this. That was our light customization for the stream. Now, I'm also planning on putting this Natasha's head, which initially I did not think it was a great likeness for Scarlett Johansson, but actually if you look at it, that is pretty great. They did some pretty amazing face printing with her. It looks very much like Scarlett Johansson. I'm planning on putting this head onto one of my previous Black Widow bodies to go with my Avengers display, because it'll just be a much better display, I'll be honest with you guys. Having this head on there versus the previous heads. Honestly, that I'm very excited for. Now, I'm not sure if the Nebula head is going to be the same or different from the previous Nebula figure that we got with the Wave 2 of Guardians of the Galaxy. And honestly, I'm not even a big fan of how she looks in the suit. Now, the batons that we have from Black Widow, of course, come together. I'm pretty sure this is just a remold of her previous batons from the Cull Obsidian wave. It's neat, it's cool. It's going to go with that head. Of course, we've got the blaster, which I'm pretty sure is just a redo of her blaster from, once again, the Wave 2 of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now, the interesting thing is that she couldn't hold this in her right hand. She's really not able to hold the blaster. That's a little disappointing. They gave an accessory without molding the hands to make sure that they can use the accessory. That's mildly disappointing. Again, I'm not going to be putting this on my display anywhere. If anything, I'm going to see what the head looks like for the figure from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Wave 2, and see if that would be if this would be better for that figure, or if this is a better head for it. But that's probably all I'm going to do, is possibly switch out the head. But let's get into our articulation here. For our head articulation, there's a decent degree downward and a amazing degree back. Our shoulders go up beyond a T-pose. Like, vastly beyond. To an amazing degree. We do actually have bicep cuts in our female figure. That's an amazing thing. Something we literally never see. Just like the fact that our female figure has double-jointed elbows. That's right. Hasbro can do a female figure with double-jointed elbows and bicep swivels that aren't just Iron Man arms reduced in size. Why don't you give that to us more, Hasbro? Additionally, her hands have the, once again, inward and outward wrist hinge. Now they are slightly impeded by the armor plate from the quantum suit on the back. Neither of her hands are trigger fingers, so you can't really use that gun anyway. And the device on the back of the left hand here also impedes on the wrist movement going backwards. For the torso articulation, because it's just a swivel, we've got a degree left and right. Can only go that far forward and that far back. We're not looking at anything fantastic here, just some serviceable articulation. It's not great, but it's not awful. No waist cut. For our hip articulation, again, some of the best hip articulation we've seen today is between her, Beta Ray Bill, and our Build-to-Figure Professor Hulk. We've, of course, got the thigh articulation with the thigh cut there. Our double-jointed knees, which go almost all the way back. There is a little bit of extra sculpting here that prevents it from going too far back. Our ankles go a decent degree forward and can go all the way on point backward. Her ankle rocker articulation does have a great degree inward and a decent degree out. All in all, would I get this figure for myself, for my own display, to use as the quantum suit? No, I wouldn't. If I had to pay any more than half price, honestly, I was already skipping these figures until I found them for half price. Once I did that, I bought them up. For our male quantum suit figure, for our head articulation, actually I'm going to pop off Scott's head and use Tony's. One, because everybody loves Iron Man. Two, because he doesn't have the regulator on the front, which means it's not going to be impeding on his articulation. And I think the head size is actually a little bit more appropriate. Maybe I'll swap this head for my first edition Ant-Man from the original Ant-Man movie, because they messed up his head on that. So maybe I'll swap that head onto there, so I've got a more appropriate head. For our head articulation, we can go a decent degree down and can go up fairly well. Our shoulder articulation gets right to about a T-pose, a little bit under. We do, of course, have our bicep swivels and our double-jointed elbows. If they're not locked up, that is. Which can get a pretty decent flex going. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. We do have the inward and outward wrist articulation, which is again impeded on by the back of the quantum suit hand here. Now, a thing of note is, because they decided to use one body and make it interchangeable with 3 different characters, with this figure having a fist hand for a left hand and an open hand for a right hand, it's just a little bit unusual seeing Iron Man without the split open hand for a Repulsar Blast. 1. 2, what is Iron Man going to be holding in his hand? It's just a little off-putting? We'll go off-putting. Honestly, of the 3, I prefer Scott's head on here the most. But I already knew this regulator was going to get in the way of the downward head movement. For our ab crunch, we've got a decent degree of backward movement and actually a pretty good degree of frontward movement. That's not bad at all. We, of course, have the waist cut. For our hip articulation, it's as good as our female hip articulation for the quantum suit body. That's rather amazing. We've had so many other figures today that had some of the worst hip articulation I've seen. And these, no, it's great. We, of course, have the thigh cuts here. The double jointed knees, which go back a fairly decent degree. It's not perfect, but it's decent. A little bit of the calf here prevents it from going too far back. For our ankle articulation, we've got a pretty good degree forward and can go all the way on point back. Our rocker ankles also can go inward to a disturbing degree and outward also to a disturbing degree. As for this set, I'll be honest with you guys. If you see it for full price, pass. Pass it up. It's not worth it for 40 bucks. And it is a Target exclusive set, mind you. Don't forget that. If you see it for 40 bucks, pass. If you can get it for 20 for the two figures, it might be worth 20 bucks. If you want the whole quantum suit team, get yourself 2 of these sets so that you've got 2 of the female bodies. You'll have 2 of the male bodies for the heads. And get yourself 2 of the quantum suit Captain Americas. Put the second head on the other cap. There you go. You've got all 5 heads for almost the entire team in their quantum... I'm sorry, 6 heads for almost the entire team in their quantum suit bodies. If you really want the quantum suits, hey, go for it. Personally, I wasn't a big fan of the quantum suits. They just weren't really my thing. I honestly just wanted this Hawkeye head and this Natasha head. Maybe this Ant-Man head. Beyond that, and possibly this Nebula head. Beyond that, I'm pretty set. I didn't need another Iron Man head. Lord knows I've got enough of them. It's not a bad set. Is it great for the price? No, not for 40 bucks. For 20 bucks, grab it. That's what I paid. I'm happy enough with just the heads, because people were selling just this Clint head and just this Natasha head for over 20 bucks combined, just for the heads. I'm happy with that purchase. Honestly, for the set, 6 out of 10. It's not fantastic. It's not awful. If you like the quantum suits, maybe you'll disagree with me. Maybe you'll tell me it's amazing. For me, it's for the extra heads. It's just for the extra heads for me. Finally, I said we would have more than one bonus figure today. And do I look like I'd lie to you? Okay, nix that question. Am I going to lie to you today? No. No, I'm not. I am not going to lie to you on this day. We do have one more bonus figure. And that is going to be the Walgreens exclusive infamous Iron Man figure. Now, we've had some Iron Man figures in the wave that we've unboxed here. Technically, 3. If you include the extra Iron Man head for the quantum suit. So, it only seems appropriate. Plus, Victor Von Doom is one of the biggest bads in all of comic books and has gone up against the Avengers in comics many a time. So, I'll go with it. Now remember, this is a Walgreens exclusive. If you want to find this infamous Iron Man figure, you got to go to Walgreens. It's the only place that they're going to have them. We've got our art on the sides here, which is copy-pasted from the back. Our blurb on the back here, and of course our window pane on the front, showing our figure and all of his neat accessories. On the inside, our background is surprisingly an Avengers A, with a yellow starburst. That's not quite what I was expecting. As Doom, even though he was trying to be a good guy here, he was only moderately successful at it. His cape is in a separate plastic tray, along with 2 energy pieces here, 2 Repulsar blasts in purple, an extra unmasked head, so that you can see just how horrendously scarred up he is. That's right. Look at that scarred up face. Not a scratch on it. And 2 extra hands, 1 extra fist, and 1 extra open palm. Now this is what I was saying about Iron Man previously, is with Iron Man figures and with rescue figures, I always expect that splayed open hand for the Repulsar Fire. Now, we know that Walgreens has been putting out an absolute ton, and I do mean an absolute ton, of Fantastic Four figures. So it's only appropriate that they would give us a Victor Von Doom. Now, it's odd that they gave us an infamous Iron Man Von Doom instead of giving us a classic Von Doom, but we've got what we've got. Let's give him a look. So, I can already tell this hood here, which is sculpted to the masked head, is going to give us some problems with articulation. So let's pop that off, and because you guys know that I love my unmasked heads to begin with, let's pop on our unmasked Victor Von Doom head. Now, if you think the body looks familiar, you are correct. This same body was used previously for the Iron Man that was seen in the Black Panther Wave 2. Or no, I'm sorry, Wave 1 of the Black Panther. The one that had the Build-A-Figure for Okoye. Not the one that had the M'Baku Build-A-Figure, but the Okoye Build-A-Figure. It's the same body, just redone in a different color, with different highlights. Is that lazy? A little. Is it part reuse? A little. Is it a good part reuse? Definitely. I think that they definitely did a good job with how they reused the parts here. And am I crazy, or is... The Repulsar hands are not articulated. I repeat, the Repulsar hands are not articulated. They are just one solid piece of rubber. So I was almost breaking the hands there. Good to know. The wrist pieces for the fist hands are articulated with the inward and outward wrist articulation as seen here. As a note, do not try and move the Repulsar hands, as you will destroy them. As I very nearly did here on camera. That would have been awful. For our head articulation, he can look a decent degree down, and he can look up to a fairly decent degree. It's not perfect either way, but it definitely works. For our shoulder articulation, alright, we've got just about a T-pose out of him. Not quite, but just about. We've, of course, got the bicep swivels, the double-jointed elbows, which have a decent flex to them. I'm surprised. He's got that good flex. Thank you, Victor Von Doom, for that. Now, as I mentioned before, the Repulsar hands do not, I repeat, do not have articulation to them. They are just one piece of molded soft goods for you to put the Repulsar blasts into. If, of course, that's how you wanted to display him. Additionally, as he does have, as mentioned before with War Machine, he has the pegs underneath that are actually intended on having these blasts put into them, you can use them instead to show levitation, but they don't seem to fit in 100% perfect. They fit in decently well, but not quite. This peg actually seems to be a little bit thinner than the other one, so it fogs out easier than this one does. Not sure why they are different sizes, but take that as you will. For our waist articulation, we've got a decent degree forward and a fairly decent degree back. Victor Von Doom will bend over backwards for you, ladies. Now that we've done our head articulation test, we can pop back on the Iron Man head. As this unmasked head is only so-so for Von Doom. It's not my favorite look of his, that's for sure. For our hip articulation, we've got a fair amount of hip articulation here, and, of course, our thigh cuts. It's not the best hip articulation, but it's appropriate. It works. Our knees, of course, they're a decent degree back. They're not a wonderful degree back. They're not perfect, but they're appropriate enough. We've got some pretty good, actually some pretty great ankle articulation here going forward, and can go all the way on point going back. His ankle rockers go in and out to an extraordinary degree each way. And since we've done all of our articulation tests, let's pop this cape onto him. See just how it looks, how it adds to the entire figure. It genuinely does. I'll be honest, it genuinely does. All in all, it's an alright figure. I'm not going to lie to you guys and say it's perfect, it's the Doom we've all been waiting for. It's okay. It works, but I think we could have gotten better. We've seen better in some of the releases that we've gotten from the Walgreens exclusives. This is a lot of part reuse on a lot of things. We've seen these same effects here time and again. We saw them with Storm. I know the Retro Wave Storm has them as well for these electricity effects. We've seen the Repulsar Blasts before. They're just the standard Iron Man Repulsar Blasts. All in all, is it a decent figure if you want an infamous Doctor Doom? Yes. If you want a good Doctor Doom? No. If you want a good Doom himself, I'd say hold out. They're bound to make, eventually, a legitimate classic Doom, I hope. With all the classic figures we've gotten of the Fantastic Four, it would be crazy of them not to make a classic Doom. If you want something unique for your collection, for the unique time that Victor Von Doom said he was going to be a hero instead of a villain, then yeah, he is that. He is definitely unique. And looking here with all of his accessories on, he looks pretty cool. He's a cool enough addition to your villain display if you do not already have a Von Doom figure. Having Von Doom myself already from the original ToyBiz runs, I don't really need another Von Doom, and he's probably not going to be replacing my Von Doom in my display. But he's alright. I'm not going to say he's perfect, but he is fun. He's a fun figure from a fun point in history when Iron Man was presumed to be dead, he was missing, he was MIA, and several people took up the Iron Man logo, or Iron Man name after his disappearance. One of them being Victor Von Doom, another one, of course, being Ironheart. Riri Williams is her name, of course. They both took up Iron Man's name. They became Invincible Iron Man and Infamous Iron Man. And now Tony's just back and doing his thing. Is this a perfect figure? No, not by any stretch of the word. Is it a fun figure? Yeah, if you can find it. I'm not going to say it's not worth $20. It's fun enough to... You could play around with it. It can be pretty fun. I'm going to give it an honest 6 out of 10. It could be better. They could have done a couple of extra things here and there because, again, as I said, a lot of this is mold reuse. The body is a straight mold reuse of that Iron Man from the first Black Panther wave. The heads are new, so that's nice. All of the accessories are, again, straight reuse from previous figures, just in a different color. I'm not even sure if the cape is new. I think the cape might be reuse as well. It might be new, I might be wrong, but it's not bad. If you genuinely need an Infamous Doctor Doom in your life, or if you are missing a Doctor Doom and want this particular Doom in your life, go ahead and grab him. Who am I to say no? But he's not my first choice for Doctor Doom. Alright, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to wrap things up. So, thank you so much for joining me today with our unboxing of the Avengers Endgame Wave 2 Professor Hulk, Smart Hulk, wave. Next week, next Sunday, make sure that you come back, see me here, because we'll have another unboxing. What's the unboxing, you say? I'm glad you asked. Next week, it is going to be the Spider-Man Kingpin Wave unboxing. This wave is out. It's a little bit tricky to find, but it's definitely worth your time if you can. Let's find out how it's going to be a week from now. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. Have a fantastic day. Remember, keep it nerdy.